Cool.
Okay, we are live. How exciting. Okay, I'm gonna kick us off. What do you think? You ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, hi, thank you for joining. And hi to anyone who has joined already or anyone who is joining us after the fact for the recording. We're really excited to have you. Just a quick intro on MeterSpaces. So this series, this is the first of the series, and the intention here is really to take Shohan, the founder of Meter.io, and bring in some other key thought leaders from the blockchain space to talk not just about Meter and their projects, but also just talk generally about what's happening in the industry. And get their thoughts on the big hot button issues that we're all spending so much time thinking about and talking about. So I feel really excited to have you here. I will do a quick introduction of myself, and then I'll ask Shohan you to do the same if you don't mind. My name's Era. I'm a Meter community member, and I also work in traditional finance. I work at an asset manager. So I'm quite interested in finance, the world of DeFi, and the world of blockchain. Shohan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up in the space?
Yeah, first, really appreciate Dara for taking the initiative to start the Meter Space series and making the entire setup so professional. I'm extremely impressed and looking forward to have more of these Meter series to discuss with the community members and also different guests in the future. Yeah, about myself, I think most of people in the Meter community have heard about this for like a couple of times. I will just make it quick. So yeah, I have a mixed engineering and finance background. Started my career as an engineer doing R&D for the first like 15 years, and then I got my MBA. Started doing investment. Started a VC fund, and then we started investing in fintech blockchain. That's how I got into the space. And in 2018, at that time, after we deployed the first fund, I felt I'm a builder at heart, enjoy building stuff, and I believe crypto is a megatrend. So instead of managing other people's money, I would rather like make something, build something for the community, for the industry. That's how we started the Meter project and been working on that since then.
Yeah, I know. And for the people on the call who know Shohan and know Meter, we are going to go back a little bit to basics for this first episode, so bear with us. But I think that will really benefit the folks who are coming into the community for the first time. Thank you for that, Shohan. And I know you do speak a lot, and so I selfishly wanted to ask you this: can you give us some fun fact or something about yourself that we don't know?
Uh, Myself?
Yeah, am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, like in general, I'm a quite boring person, but yeah, maybe I bring a fun fact for like Meter, because
Okay.
initially when Meter started, we tried to like come up with different names. We actually initially the official name was called Z Dollar.
Z
Like
dollar.
yeah, we actually have a logo of like two capacitor holding electricity in the middle. That was the first generation of logos. Yeah, and then yeah, we just feel like since the whole goal is to deviate from dollar, we should probably just like avoid the not mean the name in the completely. And we've been like searching different like names,
Yeah.
like yeah, it probably like 2 3 months for us to come down to the name Meter. Yeah.
Huh. I love that. I think that after the fact, an action item is we're going to share that logo just for fun, just to see what it looks like. We all want to
Yeah, sure.
know. And for the record, I don't believe you're a boring person. So next episode, maybe I'll give you a week to think about a fun fact. You got to bring
Yeah,
one next week. Okay.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have too much time and there's a lot to go through. And obviously this is a series, so we won't rush through anything, but I did want to go just back to basics for a second. As a Meter community member, I know there are a lot of Meter has a lot of objectives, and it touches on a lot. needed in the blockchain space. I wanted to first talk about something that's really central to Meter, and you write a lot about in the white paper, which is the idea of, our stablecoin. You talk about the volatility of exchange rates in the virtual world and the real world, which makes, a healthy blockchain economy really difficult. And you clearly articulate the need for a stable unit of account that's tied to the physical world. That's very important detail. So will you walk us through how you arrived at MTR as a stable currency and how you decided to peg to electricity?
Yeah, at that time, like back in 2018, there were actually quite some different stable coins project came online, and some of them actually pretty well. Like for example, at that time, there's a project called Basis, raised probably like 100 to 150 million at that time, and it was completely uncollateralized algorithm stablecoin. So because at that time I was an investor as well, I was looking at these projects. I was just thinking, hey, how come like these type of project can raise so much money from like really high profile investors? I mean, for these investors, it's impossible for them to not to understand some of the basic economics and finance concepts. Why are they still supporting like such like wrong or like completely bogus ideas? So that's a part that really shocked me at the time. So I was thinking, hey, instead of doing something that doesn't make sense, maybe we should try to design something that actually makes sense. So that's how I started thinking about stablecoin. And also, I was thinking at that time, like probably the best application for blockchain is still in the finance space. And I still believe that today as well. And if you look at the way how stablecoin designs and also its position in the economy, it's actually the most fundamental building blocks of finance and also the entire economy. So in order to do it, in order to build a proper financial stack, you need to have the base layer designed properly. So since I was thinking about like how the future metaverse, or like at that time it was like the virtual world, how the virtual world is going to be created, I was thinking it may be like a completely different economy, a complete different stack. In that case, pegging to a dollar may be not that important in that such a virtual world. That's how the whole thought process started. And yeah, I mean, like some of the idea may be valid, some of the idea may be a little too. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, maybe I would say maybe a little bit too beyond, like beyond our time. So, so that's why like we don't see like Meter explode yet, because it takes time for people to sort of building consensus on or building confidence on such a like very different concept. But I think it's a worthwhile like thinking, yeah, or like exercise or experiment. Yeah. So basically, at that time, like based on the financial theory, there's something called the impossible trinity. What it means is fixed exchange rate, independent monetary policy, and also free flow of capital. These three things cannot coexist at the same time. So that means in order to build like a packed currency, let's say to US dollar, there are only two ways to do it. One is the Hong Kong way. Basically, you have 100% reserve in US dollar, and you can like back it for interchange at any time completely free. So that's one way. The other way is the Chinese way. You claim a pack and then you do not allow free flow of capital. putting different capital restrictions. That's the only two way of holding the peg. And obviously, at that time, I don't think it's right to do either way, because we want to avoid centralization, and no one want to have capital flow restrictions, right? So that's when I think, hey, it's probably just let's give up the peg, create some economically like there's equilibrium there, and can build a certain level of stability. So that's how the meter come into being. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I hear you talk a lot about electricity being one of the most stable assets. So that was, part of the decision to peg to electricity, because if you look at the historical data, it's so consistent. You mentioned the impossible trinity and how a lot of investors may or may not understand some of the fundamentals of economics that go into determining whether or not a coin will in fact be stable. Can you talk about some of the shortcomings of existing stable coins and maybe how meters approaching things differently?
Yeah. So actually, if you look at like existing stablecoin designs, there are basically just three categories. One is like similar to what I mentioned earlier, like Hong Kong way. So you have 100% reserve in US dollar, and you provide inter-exchange. And obviously, this is like a regulated play. Essentially, you want to be a bank, and you have to comply with all the banking regulatories. At the end of the day, only Federal Reserve is qualified to be such an issuer. So, yeah, I believe that's a Federal Reserve's game at the end of the day. And the other way is that's an invalid way, essentially. The algorithm stable coins. You just try to create stability out of thin air. There's no collaterals. That's the other like extreme. Obviously, all the projects that tried this approach have failed. And there's a middle way, like that's using cryptocurrency as collateral, and it's typically over collateral, and then you use them as collateral to build the stablecoin. So there are several limitations. One is the stablecoin you issued, its circulation, its liquidity has to be much smaller than the underlying collateral. So otherwise, what happens if there's like bank run event, right? I mean, there's need to be enough collateral and liquidity to basically support your outstanding liabilities. And then typically these type of approach rely on oracles to feed the price of the collateral currency. So Oracle is actually like something like really interesting, and also people didn't realize how fragile the DeFi stack is. Actually, most of the DeFi stack is built on top of oracles, relying third party or like external project to feed prices onto the blockchain. But because of this, reliable data is actually a really scarce resource. And also they tend to be very centralized as well. And that means typically Oracle project tend to be like centralized. Even though a lot of them try to make them like decentralized, but still underlying the data itself is actually pretty centralized. So that's as a building block. It's actually a systematic risk. For example, if like a prominent Oracle providing wrong data into the blockchain, then the entire stack is going to block. I mean, it's going to collapse. That actually already happened. For example, during some of the bridge hacks, right? So, like for example, in the most recent hack, the Harmony bridge got hacked. All the like USDC, ETH, whatever, they lost the reserve. But Chainlink is still feeding the like outside data in there. So that caused the hacker or some of the other people was able to using that information to like because the lending borrowing protocol like Avi, Harmony is still using these round data, and people were able to withdraw. I think it was one from the lending protocol and cause some bad debt. So yeah, so that's one of the issues for Oracle.
Mm. Interesting. I was going to ask you about Harmony One, so I'm glad you touched on that. One other thing that happened recently that just is on my mind because we were talking about stablecoins. What are your thoughts on the recent Luna crash? Do you think that is reflective of some of the issues around the impossible trinity and adhering to fundamental economic principles, or was that something else?
Yeah, I mean, the Luna crash is exactly what I talked about, like for the cryptocurrency-backed collateral coins, right?
Yeah.
So it requires the underlying uh, collateral to be much higher, I mean, in terms of size and also liquidity to the circulation of the stablecoin itself. But what happened to Luna was during the bull market, obviously, like music's playing and then Luna price is going up. Oh, by the way, the Luna's UST is essentially backed by the Luna uh, token itself. So when the market goes up, the Luna price is going up, and it's bigger than the UST price. So people will have less concerns, and just also feel after you've been using it it has been pegging, just feel it's like too big to fail. But when the market turns, and I think the pivot point comes to when the Luna market cap is actually smaller than the UST market cap. That's when people got nervous and start the bank run. Essentially, what happened is just a bank run scenario. Like everyone is trying to sell their UST tokens, and this protocol tried to bring it to the pad, and then just issuing more and more Luna token, causing the pyramid to collapse.
Yeah. Too big to fail it never works out, does it?
Yeah, in finance, there's nothing called too big to fail.
Right. No, famous last words. Famous last words. That's it. Yeah, as someone who considers themselves a lay person in crypto, reading the white paper really helped me understand a lot of this. And I would encourage anyone who's listening who hasn't done that to do it, because you'll greater appreciate what Shohan and the team have done with the stablecoin for this project and respecting these economic principles that we're talking about. And I do agree with you that Meter is really ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And so that demands patience from those of us who are part of the project. That will be well worth it. And I want to, while we could talk about this, I want to slightly pivot because I'm conscious of the time to two of the other main objectives of Meter. And then after that, we'll dive into some more just recent market stuff. But Can we talk about the Meter network for a minute? Meter's also importantly an Ethereum scaling solution built on the hot stuff consensus, which is extremely fast. Can you talk about the value add of the scaling solution and maybe how it's different from other similar things on the market?
Yeah, so before Meter, in terms of scaling solutions, there's mainly the Tendermint or Cosmos project. They introduced the PBFT consensus protocol. So that consensus protocol is actually designed in the 70s. It has been people have been trying to improve on it. But there's several fundamental issues with it because in that protocol design, it assumes a reliable network and reliable, more like enterprise type of environment. So if the block proposer, the node that proposing a new block fails, there's no grace or an easy way of changing that block proposer, or they call it leader. So that actually is not a valid assumption in the decentralized space, because any node could potentially fail, right? So in order to avoid that issue, the Cosmos team actually took a shortcut, I would say. So what they end up was doing was they put a like underlying assumption that the network is highly synchronized. The entire network is working like a clock. So every time slot, there's one block proposer or like one node supposed to propose a block. So that's actually a very strong assumption of the network.
Mm.
And actually, like for example, Solana, the whole thing is try to build a different type of clock out of this. But fundamentally, the consensus itself is still the traditional PBFT consensus. So the hot stuff consensus Meter uses is actually invented in 2018. The benefit it brings is it has a very graceful way of switching the block proposer for like a different leader. And also it doesn't require a highly synchronized network. You don't have to have a network-wise clock. So that's why you notice on the Meter blockchain, sometimes our like a block production period varies. It depends on if there's actually some nodes are broken in the network, or like they are like offline where they have problem catching up with the network. So that actually makes the Meter network is much resilient to failures and also can be much more decentralized. Also, the requirement for running a Meter node is much lower. For example, our minimum requirements like is have 2 virtual CPU and 8 GB of memory. That's probably one of the lowest in the blockchain space. And so what it brings eventually as a value for the blockchain users is you can have much more or like many more nodes to secure your blockchain, but the still performance of the network is really fast. And also every block is instantly finalized. So on Ethereum, you may notice when you deposit to exchanges, there's like confirmation requirement, right? So that means how many blocks have to be built after your transaction block is mined. So that's to secure, make enough confidence that your transaction is finalized. But it's still a probability game. But on Meter, every block, as soon as you see them, all the transactions are finalized. So that's actually one of the crucial requirements for financial type of applications, because you don't want people to like change the transaction like all of a sudden after you make a deal with them, right? So, and also because we redesigned the stack of the Meter with Ethereum compatible solution, so we can have front running resistance, which means no one can put transactions in front of your transactions by observing what you do. When you a lot of users who uses DEXs like Uniswap may notice if they put in like a big order, there may be like other bots trying to put a transaction in front of his buy order to jack up the price and then sell immediately after your big buy order was executed. So you end up losing money immediately. That's called sandwich attack. So this is not possible on Meter anymore. So in summarize, we want to create like the best trade-off for decentralization and performance in terms of a Ethereum scaling solution, and also try to address some of the pain points people have using Ethereum, but not breaking the compatibility with Ethereum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm glad you touched on the front running resistant component, because I think that that is extremely important and maybe something that some folks do understand and some folks maybe don't. That sandwich attack that you referenced is a pain point that the larger industry is experiencing. And so for Meter to be front running resistant is more of a reason for, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for dApps from like DEXs and so on and so forth to come to Meter because of that feature, right? And that is sort of the next horizon when I think about where Meter is right now. And we'll talk more about this down the line in other episodes. But growing the ecosystem is such an important part of what's happening right now, right? There's a really good foundational technologies, and protocol, and growing that ecosystem is enabled by things like being front running resistant, which is a huge differentiator. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, for example, in traditional finance, front running is something that exchanges trying to block as well, right? Like hedge fund, they are trying to build their trading desk or like trading computer closer to the exchange, just like a few miles, that type of thing, to just be able to inject transactions ahead of other people. So so this happens in traditional finance as well, but it's like more obvious on blockchain because it's completely transparent. People can immediately identify and now analyze it. So I think like in a transaction type of applications, especially like DEXs, they can benefit a lot from front running resistance.
Yeah, that's true. I think there are a couple interesting movies about high frequency trading firms and that battle to get that just millisecond difference, and super low latency, but we won't get into that. Thank you. That's really helpful. Again, I want to pivot to that third objective of Meter that I referenced earlier, and that would be Meter Passport, which is the cross-chain infrastructure. Again, a lot of folks are familiar, but can you talk about your vision for the cross-chain infrastructure and what it means for Meter?
Yeah. So actually, we started developing Meter Passport was when we launched the Meter blockchain, and we tried to get the Meter token to other blockchain, and also have other tokens coming into the Meter blockchain to help building the ecosystem. So during the process, that was beginning of 2021. Actually, I would say summer of 2020. So during the process, we realized, hey, in the future, the development of the blockchain is actually very similar to the development of internet. So initially, there are only isolated networks. There's no internet, right? And then when internet comes into being, heterogeneous networks, in different places, different enterprises, different industries, they just get connected together. And there's a common language they can speak to, like TCP/IP, to allow them to communicate with each other. So a program on one network can communicate with program on a different network and to interact with each other. So I think that's where the crypto blockchain, or like the crypto network, the financial internet, should move to in the future, because there is no one blockchain that gonna address all the need, all the requirement, and all the interests of everyone. That's not what I believe. No matter what this is a little bit controversial. Some Ethereum believer may think Ethereum is the internet, and everything will be on Ethereum, when the Ethereum 2.0 and everything coming was fully delivered. But that's not the internet scales. No matter what kind of trade-offs you make, at the end of the day, a single network, people are fighting for a common resource. And at the end of the day, that resource is going to be a bottleneck. It's not going to be enough. The internet scales horizontally, scales out by connecting a lot of different heterogeneous network together. And that's where I believe the future is. And if you look at that internet stack, one of the interesting things is there's a router that translates the communication among different networks. Just like your home network connects to the internet through the router, right? But the thing is, you don't really care what's the brand, what kind of operating system running on that router. So I think that's where the router is what the Meter Passport is. We started developing Meter Passport because we need a basic infrastructure, a reliable router to do that network communication. But we don't believe it will help lock up everyone and it has to be the router for everything. Because I mean, you shouldn't be care about like what the router is, right?
Yeah.
So it just has to be like a smooth and reliable, secure infrastructure connecting different things together, and not just like asset transfers, but also like information transfers, communication information for the programs to like securely pass across networks. So yeah, that's the design goal of Meter Passport. Both allow asset transfers and smart contract calls across different blockchains. And we want it to be like decentralized and secure. And obviously, there are a lot to be improved and worked on that. And we learned our lessons from our previous mistakes as well. So yeah, it's a process, and we will get there. And also, I think um, it's not a like a one router that solves everything. There will be like different routers out there. They just we started making Meter Passport because there's no reliable router for us. But I mean, in the future, there will be many reliable routers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you touch a little bit in the white paper on some of the shortcomings of around the belief that one network or one project will be the end all be all here. And the reality, I agree with you. I don't know how controversial it is, but you go into some details around the why with that. Can you give us just quickly like a real world example of what you mean when you talk about a real world example of how this is going to actually be implemented in a creative way? Some enabling a financial instrument or something like that.
Yeah. For example, a real world example is, for example, a DEX or like a trading protocol may be able to automatically move liquidity from from one network to another network. For example, if you have a strategy that provide liquidity on different DEXs, right? So based on like the liquidity on or like the trading volume on different uh, blockchains, you may want to automatically moving liquidity from, let's say, from like Ethereum to Meter or to like Polygon or like yeah, different other networks. So that's one of the potential applications.
Yeah.
And also like for example, if you're like a yield farming, you may be the protocol itself may be automatically moving the like capital from one network to another network to find the best yield, things like that.
That's quite interesting. Yeah, very, very exciting. I know, so we're hitting the 30-minute mark. We're going to do about probably 10, 15 more minutes. I want to jump into out of Meter specifically and just more into a few of the hot button items that are happening in the market right now. I know we all in the community value your opinion and your thoughts. So a couple of things I wanted to ask you just right off the bat, generally speaking. I know we mentioned this, Meter is a bit ahead of its time, and you all started back in 2018. So how have things changed since then? Like, how do you see the future of crypto in the immediate next 3-5 years?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of advancement, obviously, since 2018. At that time, there's no DeFi. We built the entire stack of DeFi since 2018. And at that time, there's like no NFTs. There's CryptoKitties, but like there's no standardized NFTs. And now that standard is there, there's like marketplaces. There's even like lending borrowing protocols built on top of NFTs, and also different concepts built on top of it. I think the entire space will basically just keep on moving based on waves. For example, when Bitcoin come into being, the narrative at that time is like the next currency, the e-cash, right? And then there's like Ethereum wave. There's like computing for the world, and then there's ICOs, and then there's DeFi's. I mean, it basically innovations keep on powering the space and moving it forward. And I believe there's enough innovation and enough people, smart people working in this field and try to basically push the frontier more and more forward. And the entire space will keep on advancing on top of these innovations. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, things change in real time on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. Let's talk about DeFi for a minute. This week, Uniswap overtook Ethereum on fees over a 7-day rolling period, which is interesting. And the token price also increased. What do you think this means? It seems like we have strong investor demand despite the bear market. So how do you see DeFi evolving? What do you think it all means?
I think you have to look at it from like a different, more at a deeper level, because when we say the Uniswap fee and the Ethereum transaction fee, there are like two kinds of different fees. Uniswap fee is more like a percentage of the transaction volume to compensate the potential impermanent loss for the liquidity providers, right? So it's typically like 0.3% of the transaction volume. And the Ethereum transaction fee is the fixed fee for like packaging transactions on Ethereum blockchain. So essentially, it's selling the capacity of the Ethereum blockchain. So there are like, in order for like, for example, Uniswap to overtake Ethereum in terms of fees, there could be either like there are a lot of transaction volumes on Uniswap, or the Ethereum transaction volume drop during the bear market. I think it's a combination of both, because like obviously if you look at the Ethereum gas price recently, it's like been pretty low. It means like there's less transactions on Ethereum. And also if the Uniswap fee goes up, that means there are a lot of like big transactions, or big value transactions, if the transaction volume count is not increasing on Ethereum. So that means there are a lot of whale-sized transactions happening on like Ethereum. Sort of like resonates like more and more whales playing on Ethereum, and Ethereum itself has more become like a whales type of game. So if you look at from that perspective, yeah, but overall, I think there's still tons of activities, especially like in a bear market, as when there's like big sell-offs, there's actually big transaction volumes as well, right? So yeah, it's you really have to like look at the data deeper to sort of triangulate what exactly it means. But obviously, it also tells us like the DeFi market itself is still strong, and there's still a lot of use cases. And DeFi is definitely one of the most valuable and valid use case for blockchain.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Even in this bear market, we're really not seeing that much activity slow. It's true. Speaking, you mentioned, and I'm kind of pivoting here, but you mentioned when you talked about the changes you've seen since 2018, you mentioned DeFi, you mentioned NFTs. You didn't mention GameFi, but I wanted to ask about GameFi. It seems like it's in its early stages, but there's a lot of excitement around GameFi about play to earn, play to learn, even the metaverse. What do you make of all of it?
Yeah, actually, I would say for games, I'm still because if you notice the cycles in crypto, like in the last cycle, initially it's a financial use case and the core blockchain projects booming, and at the end of the bull cycle, it's the games, because those are not really strong blockchain use cases. Typically, games are built on top of like gamifications, and also even like some Ponzi schemes try to like get people in. So at the end of the bull market, you often see like different games being hyped. Like back in 2018, there's like CryptoKitties. There's like at that time like EOS was really strong, and everything on EOS was like more like GameFi type of thing, right? Like, so I think it's just a natural cycle of the blockchain itself. But obviously, the games are improving other than the like more the gamified design or like Ponzi type of design, the fundamental is also like playing and introducing more and more different type of plays into the blockchain space. But the design of the games in blockchain is actually very different from the traditional games. Because the traditional games, there are a lot of users. But in the blockchain space, because we have much less users, but more like the users are much more willing to spend than traditional game users. So in a traditional game, like people are talking about millions or like tens of millions of users, but most of them like just players. They don't spend money or they don't have economic activities in the game. But for blockchain games, it seems like most people playing those games are trying to make money or like trying to have some financial aspect involved in the game. So people are still trying to like figure out how to build games for this type of users. So it's a lot of games because of that. I mean, like they're working on the edges. I mean, on the one side is the greed, like you want to design something to in a short time attract a lot of users and create a boom. But when you do that, the tokenomics tend to be like very Ponzi like, and the game may not last a long time. But on the other side, you want to introduce a new type of gameplays and new type of experience for these users, so the game can last longer, and also people can engage longer. So I think it's a trade-off, and very few games that can actually do this trade-off properly and in a long-term fashion. But we do see like for example, some of the metaverse games are from the 2018 time, right? The Decentraland, the Sandbox, and those I think are definitely valid cases. And I mean, they foster community, they foster like long-term engagement. I think those will stay. But like more and more things, I think it's just a matter of experiment, and people will figure it out. And developers will figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, the market for gaming is so enormous, right? If you just take a holistic look, not just in the world of blockchain, but the traditional gaming market. And I wonder, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but I wonder how you capture those people, how you introduce them to blockchain, how you get them comfortable with this type of gaming. Is there a need to financially incentivize? I mean, it sounds like those folks are just used to playing for the sake of playing. So how do you capture market share?
Yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, if you can do well in a traditional game, oftentimes you can get much more money from the traditional world, right? So why do you move to a blockchain and tune to a very different like user base that requires completely like redo everything? So yeah, that's a dilemma for a lot of traditional game developers as well. Yeah.
Do you think it will be a question of when crypto becomes more, when we see the crypto user base increase, let's say general confidence around crypto increases, more new users creating profiles and wallets and things like that, maybe that's dipping the toe in the world of blockchain, and then GameFi is a second step. So it will lag, but I would imagine it would follow the trajectory of the crypto market usage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, as the user base grows, I mean, the user behavior will be more diversified as well. I think for this cycle, the user base is already much bigger than like the 2017, 2018 cycle. And we see a lot of different user behavior as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to pick your brain about the metaverse as well. We don't have nearly enough time to get into that today, because that's a different can of worms entirely. I'm noticing that we are about at time, and I want to respect everyone's time who's listening. There are a number of topics that we want to get into that we didn't get to today. So for everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, we're going to talk about NFTs. We'll talk about the metaverse. We'll talk again a bit about what's happening in the market, and we'll talk about Meter. And we may or may not have a special guest that will be announced on Meter's Twitter. So keep an eye out there. Shohan, do you want to say anything before we close? I want to thank you again for this. This is so interesting. I'm super grateful to be able to have the opportunity to host this. And anything you want to say to the folks listening before we close out?
Yeah, I think first, really appreciate Ara for taking the initiative. And really enjoyed the conversation and love the setup. And for the listeners, it's great that you joined the first episode of MeterSpace. You're early, and no wonder you chose Meter. And we look forward to have more of this and have more discussions and interactions. And thanks a lot for your time, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Everything he said. And tune in to hear Shohan's fun fact. Next week, you have to come with one. I haven't forgotten. Okay. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.